Welcome to MATCH B2B Insights, the podcast where we actually expose what drives enterprise revenue and cut through the B2B noise. I'm Benny Fluman, founder and CEO of MATCH B2B, and today I am joined by my co-host, Dan Mercer, a veteran CFO who has lived on both sides of the budget sheet. Dan, welcome back to the mic.
Thanks, Benny. It's good to be here. I was actually thinking about our topic today because just last week I was looking at a pipeline review for one of our business units. They had 32 enterprise deals listed in late stage. Every single one of them had been sitting there for over 90 days. 90 days. The sales team kept telling me, "Oh, the tech team loves the demo. The users are super excited. They're logging into the trial." But when I asked, "Okay, when does the contract get signed?" Silence. It was pure pipeline theater.
Pipeline theater. I love that term, Dan, because it's so incredibly common. You've got SDRs celebrating because they booked 20 demo calls, and marketing is high-fiving over a spike in white paper downloads. But what they're actually collecting are what I call tourists. These are people who have plenty of time to look at cool software. They love the slick UI. They ask for custom dashboards, but they don't have a single dollar of budget authority. There's a massive, massive chasm between user interest and economic urgency.
Exactly. The user wants to make their day-to-day life slightly easier. That's a nice to have. But as a CFO, I don't sign checks for slightly easier. I sign checks when there is a risk of a 5% hit to our operating margin, or a contractual SLA penalty that's going to cost us $200,000 next quarter if we don't fix a specific bottleneck. If the sales rep can't show me how their software prevents that specific loss, the deal is dead. It just sits in the pipeline forever until the rep finally marks it closed loss due to, no decision.
Right, and no decision is actually your biggest competitor in B2B. It's not the other vendor down the street. It's the comfort of doing absolutely nothing. When a vendor spends all their energy showing off their product capabilities, their shiny AI features, their integrations, they're completely missing the point. They are assuming the customer has already decided to buy something, and now they're just comparing features. But in reality, the customer is still trying to figure out if this problem is even worth the pain of changing. If you don't build that logical urgency from day one, you're just entertaining tourists. Let's talk about that gravity of the status quo, because I think a lot of founders underestimate just how comfortable inefficiency can be. People look at a manual, spreadsheet-based process and think, that's a nightmare, they must want to replace it. But to the company, that spreadsheet is a known, predictable quantity. They know exactly how much it costs, they know who owns it, and they know how to work around its flaws. It has a massive gravitational pull.
Well, because there's a friction tax to change. What people forget is that buying software isn't just about paying the subscription fee. There's a fully loaded cost of change. I have to allocate project management resources. I have to retrain 50 employees. We risk losing data during migration, and there's a highly predictable dip in operational productivity during the first 30 days of transition. If a software license costs $50,000, the actual cost of implementation might be $200,000 in lost time and risk. So if the vendor is only proving $50,000 of value, they're already deep in the red in my book.
Let's anchor that with a real scenario. Take HR technology. I worked with a company selling an automated onboarding platform. They were pitching a mid-sized enterprise that was onboarding about 40 new hires a month, using a messy mix of PDFs, emails, and manual data entry into their payroll system. The HR team was complaining constantly about the administrative burden. The vendor's sales deck was full of slides about employee experience, seamless digital signature workflows, and modern brand perception for new hires.
And let me guess, the HR director loved it, but the CFO killed it?
Dead on arrival. Because the HR director went to the CFO and said, "We need $40,000 a year for this onboarding tool because it makes our workflow so much nicer." And the CFO looked at the spreadsheet and said, "Look, our manual process might be tedious, but we aren't missing compliance deadlines. Our payroll is accurate, and the current HR staff is already paid for. The manual pain is tolerable." The status quo won because the vendor didn't quantify the actual commercial risk of those manual errors. They sold delight instead of risk mitigation.
Right. If they had shown that manual data entry errors were causing a 3% payroll discrepancy rate that cost $90,000 a year in compliance fines and wage corrections, now you got my attention. Now the status quo isn't comfortable anymore. It's actively costing me money. That's the shift from a nice-to-have to a must-have.
This brings us to a major pet peeve of mine, the absolute obsession in B2B GTM with user delight. We've had a decade of product-led growth advice telling everyone that if you just design a beautiful interface and make the onboarding flow frictionless, the product will sell itself. But when you are selling 5- or 6-figure enterprise deals, user delight doesn't show up on the balance sheet.
It really doesn't. I've never seen a line item on an income statement for delighted employees. I mean, look, I want our team to have good tools, but when we're allocating capital, delight gets pushed to the bottom of the list every single time. We have to translate capabilities into financial outcomes. Walk me through how you actually do that, Benny. Say you have a highly technical product. How do you bridge that gap?
Okay, let's take a complex tech product, say a supply chain platform with real-time AI anomaly detection. A standard GTM message would be, our advanced AI algorithms analyze your supply chain data in real time to detect anomalies and send instant dashboard alerts to your inventory managers. To a technical user, that sounds incredible. They can picture the clean dashboard, the instant alerts. But to you, Dan, as the CFO, what does that actually mean?
Honestly, it sounds like more noise. It sounds like my team is going to spend all day looking at alerts instead of doing their actual jobs. It doesn't tell me why I should write a check.
Exactly. So we have to translate that feature into a balance sheet outcome. Instead of talking about AI algorithms and alerts, we say, by detecting supply chain anomalies 72 hours faster than manual audits, we enable you to reduce your excess safety stock buffer by 15%. For a company of your size, that frees up $6 million in working capital from your warehouse within the first 6 months, while maintaining your 99.8% order fulfillment rate. See the difference? We didn't lead with the AI. We led with the $6 million of freed up working capital.
Now that is a business case. You've connected a technical feature directly to liquidity. Let me give you another example from my world, cybersecurity. Most security vendors sell threat intelligence dashboards, or comprehensive vulnerability scanning. They show scary slides of hackers and talk about peace of mind. But peace of mind isn't a financial metric. If a security team wants a 7-figure budget for a new vulnerability management platform, they need to frame it around exposure mitigation. For example, we have 1,200 legacy systems that are subject to GDPR compliance. A single data breach on these systems carries a regulatory fine exposure of up to 4% of global turnover, which is $40 million. This tool reduces our detection to remediation window from 80 days to 4 hours, reducing our modeled risk exposure by 85%. That is a $40 million mitigation case. That's how you get a board-level sign-off.
That is a perfect bridge to how you actually evaluate these proposals, Dan. Because when a business case like that lands on your desk, you aren't just looking at the ROI number the vendor put in their PDF brochure. You're running your own internal calculus. What are the core metrics you're actually calculating when a proposal comes through?
I reduce every single purchasing decision to 3 variables. First, cost per outcome. This is not just the software license price. I calculate the fully loaded cost. The software, the internal engineering hours required for implementation, the cost of retraining, and any third-party consulting fees. What is the total cash outflow required to get to the actual result? If a vendor tells me their tool costs $50,000, but we have to spend $150,000 in custom integration work, my cost per outcome is $200,000. I need that math to be completely transparent.
And what's the second variable?
Time to cash. How long until we actually see the savings or the revenue increase hit our bank account? If a product has a 30-month implementation cycle before we realize a single dollar of savings, that's a massive risk in a volatile market. I look for solutions that have a payback period of under 18 months, ideally under 12. If you can show me that cash starts flowing back to us in month 4, that deal moves to the front of the line.
And the third?
Downside risk. What happens if this project fails? If we pull the plug after 9 months, are we stuck in a 3-year contract? Did we dismantle our old system so we can't go back? I look for vendors who can mitigate that risk, whether that's through phased rollouts, clear pilot criteria, or SLA guarantees. If a vendor is confident in their product, they should be willing to share some of that operational risk. If they demand a massive upfront commitment with no safety valves, I start getting very nervous.
This is exactly why GTM teams need to stop sending those generic, oversimplified ROI calculators. Those PDFs where you plug in 3 numbers and it magically says, your ROI is 400%. No executive believes those. We need to equip our internal champions with realistic, conservative, fully transparent financial models. Give them a spreadsheet where they can adjust the variables, test the worst-case scenarios, and actually defend the assumptions in front of their finance team. So how do we actually build that urgency? A lot of sales teams try to create artificial urgency. They say, oh, if you sign by the end of the quarter, I can give you a 20% discount. Or, this pricing is only good until Friday. But to an experienced buyer, that just smells like desperation. It doesn't create logical urgency.
It absolutely does not. It actually makes me want to wait even longer, because I know they're desperate to hit their quota. Real urgency has to be logical, not promotional. It has to come from the cost of doing nothing, what we call the cost of delay.
Yes, let's look at a concrete logistics example to show how you quantify that. Imagine a company with a fleet of 500 delivery trucks. They're looking at route optimization software that costs $120,000 a year. The software can reduce their fuel and maintenance costs by 7%. If the sales rep just keeps pitching smarter routing and happier drivers, there's no real timeline. The deal stalls.
But if you walk me through the math, let's say their monthly fuel bill for those 500 trucks is $3 million. A 7% reduction is $210,000 a month in savings. If the software license is $10,000 a month, the net savings is $200,000 every single month. So, if we delay this decision by 90 days to think about it, that 3-month delay doesn't just push the project out. It literally costs the company $600,000 in flushed fuel costs. That is the cost of delay.
Exactly. Now, the sales rep doesn't need to offer a 20% discount to close the deal by Friday. The customer can see that every week they delay is costing them $50,000 of pure cash. That is logical urgency. It reframes the status quo from safe and comfortable to actively bleeding capital. You make the decision to do nothing feel commercially riskier than making the change.
And that is the shift. When the internal champion goes to their CFO, they aren't asking for money to buy a new toy. They're presenting a business case showing that the company is currently losing $200,000 a month. And here's the exact implementation plan, the fully loaded cost, and the risk mitigation strategy to stop that leak. That is a deal that gets approved.
This brings us to our closing challenge for every founder, CEO, and GTM leader listening today. Go look at your website, look at your sales deck, look at the outbound sequences your SDRs are sending right now. Are you selling an impressive product with cool features, or are you proving why your buyer can no longer afford to do nothing? If you're selling the product, you are going to keep losing deals to no decision. You have to weaponize the cost of delay and speak the language of economic impact.
Well said, Benny. If you can't prove who is paying for the status quo, you aren't ready to sell yet. All right, good chatting. Talk soon.
Thanks, Dan. Talk soon.